very much. Thank you for everyone that's joining us today. As you know, my name is Julia, and I'm very excited to introduce Femtech Canada to many of you who probably haven't heard what that is, and also excited about our Q&A at the end of today's presentation. Please feel free to ask any questions you have and save those to the end. I am the CEO of Treehouse and also sit on the advisory board as well. Femtech Canada is a group, and we're going to walk through that as to what it is and maybe things that might be inspiring for you. It is also led by Rachel Bartholomew, who is the founder and lead advisor that we have. She's a colleague of mine, and she's the CEO of High Ivy, which is a pelvic floor device that she designed and is currently getting FDA approval. So you're going to learn about a lot of really great companies in this space, from fertility all the way into menopause today. So the mission at Femtech Canada really exists to inspire Canadian entrepreneurs, but also researchers to lead in women's health specifically and innovation. So we connect many femtech companies with the resources and recognition that they deserve specifically. Our objective today is really to teach you about Femtech Canada, the opportunities that exist in women's health, because we're here at Algonquin College where we have many students and innovators and students that are interested in maybe starting businesses, maybe working with these businesses, and we're really here to really inspire you to solve these problems with us, innovate in these spaces, and provide you the resources of how to get involved. So what is femtech? You maybe have never heard this term. It is a term that has been coined and has been existent for several years now. And it includes products, services, diagnostics, like I mentioned, pelvic floor devices, for example, and software, which is what I do at Treehouse, that address health and wellness concerns, specifically that solely disproportionately and differentially affect women, girls, non-binary folks, trans people, and those assigned female at birth. Now, women's health and why does it matter? Well, this is something that I talk about on a daily basis in my business, when I speak to my employees, when I speak to prospects, when I even speak to investors. Women's health has been historically under-researched, underfunded, and underserved. Even though we make more than 50% of the world's and global population, for some reason, it is continually being underserved and even under-invested in. So this is why it's important to have discussions like this with folks like you. Let's look at some of these statistics. They're pretty impressive. As I mentioned, more than 50% of the world's population is female. We also know that women make 80% of healthcare decisions in their household. So having access to great products and being able to advocate on their behalf is critical. But some of these statistics are absolutely shocking. And they were shocking to me when I started looking into them, about how women were only required to be in clinical trials as of 1993. I mean, that is shocking to me. I was born in the 80s. The fact that this didn't exist until I was really a child is shocking to me. So a lot of these, unfortunately, are still prominent, and these are reasons why we need to have innovation in this space, why we need to have companies in this space specifically. Now, it's also important to look at this through a gendered lens and understand that it doesn't just come from creating an idea and then creating a product. You have to look at the research behind it, the clinical research, the products and services, and then how do we actually put that into application and access into the actual environment that we're in on a daily basis. So I'm going to stop here for a second, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and feel free to either put your hand up or just blurt it out. But it would be great for us to just have a very short, just a short little dialogue here on what health concerns do you think impact women on a daily basis that really you see? And what disproportionately impacts and affects women's health? Is there anything in particular that stands out since the beginning of this presentation, but also in general in your life? Everyone's shy today. Yes, please. Absolutely. So the audience member said endometriosis. So endometriosis is absolutely, and PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. This is something that affects many women, and it impacts fertility, it impacts into their aging, into menopause. And so it is something that we work with. A lot of companies focus on endometriosis in Canada, and not a lot of people know about it. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
Menstruation in general, people are 80, maybe close over 90% of people who menstruate experience some type of negative health impact. and it's still stigmatized, so you can't openly talk about it in workplaces or in schools.
Yeah, absolutely. This audience member said menstruation, and actually, that's incredibly important. You start to educate at a young age, right? Girls as young as age 8 or 9 should have conversations about this. And it's not only girls, but it's also the boys in those classrooms that need to understand what this is and the impact that this has on life. Because at the end of the day, it's male and female, and many other genders in particular, that you need to understand these impacts that they have. So really great questions to start thinking about, kind of get those juices flowing. Now, women's health in Canada, we've broken it down into 3 particular elements, and that is really access to care and improving care delivery. This is something that I advocate for a lot in my company at Treehouse. I grew up in Alberta, where a lot of access to care in rural environments was very, very hard. You might just have one small medical team, but you need to be able to access practitioners, whether that's in rural areas or in maternal deserts. Essentially what that means, if you've never heard that term, is basically not having access to an OBGYN or having to fly in. We have many women, even to this day in Northern Ontario, that have to fly in at 20 weeks and stay away from their families until they give birth. So having access to care or having access to digital solutions that allow you to stay connected to practitioners is critical. Social determinants of health and delivering culturally sensitive care. Again, having technology that allows you to stay connected, depending on whether you're a new Canadian, whether you're Indigenous, whether you have a certain religion or diversity that we need to be aware of. A lot of the technology that was created and built was not built with this in mind whatsoever. So what we focus on at Treehouse, but in all the other companies, is really to build on that. And improving diagnostic pathways and addressing stigmatized areas. And that is specifically to what we've mentioned here, which is menstruation and endometriosis. How do you find that? How do you diagnose it earlier, and how do we make it so that it's less stigmatized? So what are the opportunities? We have a lot of white spaces and problem areas, and we're going to dive into those specifically. There's not that many companies that are operating in Canada and in the United States markets. And if there are, there's also limited research that exists in post-secondary universities and colleges across Canada. So that's why it's important for us to talk about this and to innovate internally. Here we can see some highlights around where this essentially where this is impacting the landscape. So as I mentioned to you, it's really all the way from fertility, and even before fertility, when we're looking at menstruation in young children, all the way up into menopause. And so there's many different companies here that are focusing in different spaces, but you might think, well, is it just menstruation? What is the space that we're looking at? So you can see that there's a broad space here, and there aren't many companies that are large global companies. And that's what we're advocating for, is, again, that continued innovation to take place. Femtech statistics, again, if you are interested in starting a company in this space, it is a market that is emerging, a market that has over $1 trillion in market size. So the market shares opportunities for creating a business are significantly large. We also know that 80% of femtech companies are female-founded, like Treehouse, the company that I lead. Unfortunately, there's only 80 companies in Canada that are doing this space. And so this number needs to grow. And this is why we talk about a lot of the things that we're talking about today, is that we need to continue to innovate, and we need to encourage individuals to create businesses and technologies that will, in fact, impact individuals throughout many stages of life. Here are an example of the different types of companies that exist in Canada to date. And as you see, we've broken it down into many different areas: pelvic health, gynecological, sexual, menstruation, skin care, maternal, fertility, apparel. You might know Knix. That's one of your big hitters right now. That's a great intimate care line. But they started off as a small startup, and they grew up into being a huge, impactful line. And then we also have some other breast health, menopause, and then mental health. Again, we'd like to see this grow exponentially over the next 3 to 5 years as well. So what do we need again, and why are we here really again to talk? we're here to talk more about those problem solvers, inspiring researchers like the ones in the room, innovators and supporters. So we want to be able to advance the research. We want to be able to create better products. We want to be able to hire individuals who can help us do this. A lot of the first employees in my company came from Algonquin College, and I am completely indebted to them because of the great opportunities that they've brought in and just the innovation that they've been able to bring in and build a product that is now used across Canada. So it's about breaking down the stigma, and whether you don't know anything about this space, it's just about having exposure to it and entering that market and entering the space if it's something that's of interest to you. Your first steps, well, it's about getting inspired. That's what the whole purpose of today's discussion is. It's about getting inspired, then it's about having this dialogue, right? So this is what we're gonna have today on this stage. And then it's about starting to do maybe a bit of your research on your own, and then understanding where those white spaces are and where would you like to contribute, or where your research would like to contribute. Set those goals, and then, as always, dream big. Nothing is impossible. It's just about consistency and hard work. That's what I truly believe anyway. If you want to learn more and want to kind of dig a little bit deeper, these are two great books that we recommend, just kind of starting your research, starting the dialogue, Doing Harm, and then Invisible Women in particular. Now, are you interested in really getting started as a student or researcher? Here in particular, Algonquin, you can do things like hackathons. You can have a case study on this in the maybe school project that you're working on in particular. You can intern or do a co-op in one of the companies that were listed on this deck. You can take entrepreneurship classes or design projects and then pitch them to companies in order for you to maybe become involved essentially in their marketing, in their content. They're always looking to kind of grow their awareness, their reach, their legitimacy within the Canadian markets, within the regional markets, or even the global markets. Network resources, if you'd like to learn more specifically and want to come to Femtech Canada and really reach out to us and talk to us directly, we do have bi-monthly roundtables. So you can go to femtechcanada.ca and be able to sign up for those, where we have essentially innovators and entrepreneurs, as well as many other types of researchers that come on a bi-monthly basis on these roundtables, and we just have a great discussion. We do have peer-to-peer office hours as well, so if you want to speak directly to a founder like myself or anyone else in that space, we do host those office hours, and then we have an online community through Slack. This is our advisory board. All of these individuals here are entrepreneurs that have companies, again, all the way from fertility into menopause, whether they are devices, whether they are software solutions like Treehouse. We have a very diverse background of individuals here with a lot of great experience and basically growing their companies from the ground up. Shout out to the companies at Femtech Canada, again, just as, so you can see some of those logos. And again, feel free to reach out to any of them and see if there are job opportunities or summer internships or anything where you might want to get involved. Here in particular, I guess they highlighted myself as well as Rachel from High Ivy and Rhea, who is doing contraception in particular, and she's innovating in that space. So that brings me to the conclusion of our presentation. I'm very keen to just have a discussion with all of you and speak directly to you, answer questions. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for coming out and really continuing this conversation in Femtech and women's health and family health in particular. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to sit down?
Sure, yeah. Go ahead.
What inspired you to decide, hey, I'm going to change paths from what you were going to school for and putting all this effort into to something completely different? And where'd you come up with that, and when, why?
Yeah. So my background is incredibly bittersweet, I would say, is the best way of putting it. I didn't leave med school by choice. I left it by the fact that I had a very horrible family situation. I started medical school when my son was a year old, so that was an endeavor in itself, and hard work as a woman actually being in medical school and having to pump in the library. That was quite challenging. But my passion, as soon as I found out I was pregnant. I always wanted to do pediatrics and family health. Like I said, I grew up in Alberta, so rural care was always number one for me. Unfortunately, after my first year of medical school, my mother, who was pretty young at the time, got a horrific prognosis. And she was basically told that she had less than a year to live. And I went to my dean and I said to him what had happened, and he said, you need to stop right now, and you need to go home, and you need to be a mother, and you need to be a caregiver to your parent. And of course, for somebody like me who is a really A-type, and I always finish everything that I complete, or that I start rather, that was a huge shift for me to do what I wanted. I had a hobby project on the side because that's the type of person that I am, and I wanted to innovate in women's health, in pediatric care. I knew that telemedicine was becoming something that was going to be absolutely impactful. We already saw it in the United States. This was pre-COVID, significant years before, and no one really knew what telemedicine was, and no one knew how we could trust it. So I really designed a platform that would help and focus care around the allied healthcare practitioners. When you become pregnant, when you have a child, you don't just lean on medical doctors. You lean on lactation consultants, you lean on so many mental health practitioners, nutritionists, but all of those people were super fragmented. And I thought, well, there's got to be a better way to streamline this care. So because I was at home and I was a stay-at-home parent and a palliative caregiver, essentially, I decided to kind of jump on it, and it took my mind off of everything that was going on. And I started this business because I was truly passionate about what happened in my life, and now it's grown and it's been positive. But life takes you in many different ways. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. I think your story is like very powerful, because so many people think, hey, I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to go to school here. I'm supposed to become this. This is what I have to do. And even like I was on the same path. I was like, I want to do sexual health stuff. I have to be a doctor, right? But I was like, I didn't ever wanted to be. And then I found my way. And I think that's so important to like, things take you other ways, and sometimes that's for the best. And like, I think that's really inspiring. Again, the floor is open for other people's questions, but I will. Oh, Kevin.
I just wanted to ask about money flow into Femtech, because I get the sense that that's changing finally after a long time, that there's a lot more money flowing into that space.
Yes and no, I would say. We haven't been particularly funded in one particular sense by the federal government, for example. There are significant contributions that will take place for individual companies, for example. Or if you're seeking investment or you're seeking capital, access to capital for your particular company, then yes, absolutely there are opportunities, especially if you're innovating and you're building either hardware or software solutions. There are ways to get funding, and I would encourage folks to feel that that's not an impediment to starting a company. There is access to capital. It's about being, again, consistent in doing your research and finding those places to find capital. But it is getting better. I'm going to say it's thawing, Kevin. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
So, yeah, I think that's a good term. Yeah. Eventually. Okay, folks, just feel free to raise your hands when you have stuff. But I guess, how do you go from like having this idea to then deciding like technology is the way to do it? And like, I'm assuming you didn't have a tech background. So.
No, I have a medical background.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like.
So no, I did not have a tech background. I am not a software engineer. However, I did have a very close family friend who was a software engineer. So I started bouncing off my ideas with him. But that aside, I think what I did was what a lot of people should do is just to put yourself in an environment where you can find innovation. So, how are you going to start a company? How are you even going to look into that? Like I mentioned, I'm a big A-type, so I like to be very organized in everything that I do. And I decided to find where could I really speak to people that are creating tech companies. And in Ottawa, that was at Invest Ottawa. Invest Ottawa is a research innovation center that allows you to really start from a business model all the way and scale your company. And so that was where I started. I went there with like a napkin of an idea, and I said to somebody, I need to speak to someone, and I'll do whatever it takes to kind of bring this off off the napkin, really. And that's where I started seeking out mentors and making myself learn about that environment. So educating yourself and just putting yourself out there and having conversations, going to things like this, and just being honest to people and saying, this is what I'm building and how can you help me? And people are usually really willing to help you out.
Oh, okay. It's just like, yeah, I'm like that. It's you say it and it's like, that sounds so easy, right? Who's inspired to go do something? It's also terrifying.
It's terrifying,
yeah.
But it is easy as soon as you take that one first step and you go to one event and you put your name on a newsletter, and then you go to another event and you talk to someone, you sit next to someone in a room like this and you just say, hi, my name's Jane and this is what I'm doing. What do you do? And it doesn't need to be formal and uncomfortable. It just needs to, a lot of people might not know this, but I'm a really big introvert. Like I get a lot of my energy gets sucked when I do things like this. So I prefer to be in my office doing research and being quiet. But you need to put yourself out there if that's something that you truly feel about. If you're passionate about it and you want to make a change, then you just have to take that first step or go with a buddy or, make yourself be part of that environment.
Awesome. I think one of the things too is like, how do people access your services and like where can we find more information? And I think that's something that people might want to know. I already found you on Instagram, but that's the easiest one. Oh, cutting out.
You're cutting out. So if you want to learn more about Femtech Canada specifically and get connected to many other companies, I encourage you to go to that website, femtechcanada.ca. If you want to learn more about what we do at Treehouse and the support that we give healthcare practitioners and individuals all the way from fertility to early childhood, you can go to our website, growwithtreehouse.ca. We're on Instagram, Grow with Treehouse, and get connected to me. You can reach out. We do DM us, and someone will get in touch with you. So if you want to have a chat or talk about anything.
Yeah, I think that's helpful because even when I was trying to find, I was like, okay, Treehouse, what do we find? So the Grow with Treehouse, it's super cute because it's the whole point is like growing from infertility all the way and fertility to early years. That's great. What pieces would you say are like the parts of how do you collide the two worlds of like medicine and tech, and where do you find yourself more in now? Is it both still or one or the other?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that medicine has made a lot of strides, obviously, over the last 50 years. And technology is incredibly important to the way that we are going to evolve healthcare, specifically around the fact that a lot of it should be focused on patient-centric care and the fact that you as the individual, as the patient or the client that is seeking the healthcare should come from you. And it's about you advocating for yourself. Now, the way that we do that now is we do it through our phones and we do it through the technology that is all around us. And that's what's really critical in the way that healthcare and medicine is being shaped. I sit really kind of in between. I'm not leading the tech anymore in the company. We now have a CTO and we have a development team and an engineering team. But at the same time, I'm there really speaking to a lot of those healthcare practitioners and trying to understand where are their pain points, what are the issues that they're having in the way that they deliver care. And then that takes time to understand, and then you translate that into how do you develop that technology to enable them to have a better streamlined method of care. So that's something that I work on tremendously. I speak to a lot of clinicians, I speak to a lot of healthcare providers, but then I also speak a lot to those end users, right, which is basically everyone in this room, on how do you want care to be delivered to you? How would you like to access it? And how do we streamline that? So it's me sitting really at that kind of junction point.
Okay. And I know like a lot of folks I hear all the time, like we have health services here for staff and students, but generally people are struggling to find healthcare practitioners. So what way, thank you, friends. What way can we, bridge sort of those gaps of like, you've got all these services available for folks, but they're still lacking, some of the key points of like healthcare needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So healthcare doesn't, we do have public healthcare, obviously, in Canada. That is something that is very unique to our country. At the same time, we still have many private services, and that is mental health, for example. Mental health practitioners are private services. Lactation consultants are private into that capacity. I think it's about what we're striving at Treehouse is really being able to bring you that and showcase that there are many different types of healthcare practitioners out there that can help and support you depending on what care that you need. It's shocking to me that many people are still using Facebook to ask, their friends, like, well, who's the best pediatric dentist out there? And that's fine, but that's where we're trying to change that so that we can create a place where those innovators and those healthcare practitioners are coming to us and saying, I want to be on a platform that is not public health and that is not based on funding, for example. We're a private company that can build it with individuals in particular and make those changes.
Okay, that's... Yeah, well, I think... Do you want to switch me mics? This one keeps cutting out. Thanks. Thank you. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Is this also... I'm like, this one's quiet.
Do you want my mic?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'll just be loud. I don't actually need a mic. For everyone who knows me knows that very well. I guess my next thing is like wondering, like you're bridging all of these gaps, right? And like you said, we shouldn't be finding out Facebook. I see so many of the like new mom groups, and all of them asking like some of the questions. Like my master's is in sexology, but public health, and the public health part of me dies inside when they're asking these questions. And like, how do we funnel those people into like an app like yours, and how because that's part of all the things that we try and do in public health are like, how do we get them to the actual right information and not the mom telling them to put like an onion under the bed, right? Like. Yeah.
I mean, evidence-based care is critical, right? And being able to focus on that rather than going through these sort of, kind of mythical methods that some people use, if that's the right term, I don't know. So the way that we do it in particular is we focus on supporting those healthcare practitioners, right? We support doulas, we support all of those folks that already have an existing client base, and those individuals then essentially advocate for the fact that their clients need to have a great client experience, which in turn will trickle down to those clients seeking out other services. Now, that's ideal if you already have, obviously, a practitioner. But the reality is, it's again about companies like ours who are then trying to become more visible, to bring their brand legitimacy and say that we do have, an accessible portal where you can find practitioners and grow that. So if you are an individual who is maybe starting out your fertility journey, or you are an individual who want to just give feedback on what type of care you want to see, I encourage you to talk to me and talk to our team, because learning and listening from people like you is really critical. That's what we did in our market research. That's where we spoke in many different internal cohorts, and we spoke to folks ranging all the way from age 21 when, maybe you're not thinking about starting a family, but you still need to be able to access care. How do you digest that? Things are very different nowadays. Not everybody is going to their family doctor to ask them about, where is the best practitioner? And oftentimes those medical doctors don't even have the time to think about who is on their roster. They're going to step out of that exam room and they're going to go and Google it, just like you are. They don't have an updated roster, I can tell you that. That's what we had to do in our clinic. And so it's about listening to folks like you and understanding what it is, how you want to see it, and then how do we shape it, how do we make it happen, and how do we get the funding to make it happen fast and not have to wait on other systems.
I think we have a question from the audience.
Hi.
Yeah.
I was just curious about, just generally, how can we as women advocate for just our mental health as a whole? Because I guess everybody... Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think the way that you do that, depending on what stage you're going through, I think it's about surrounding yourself with folks who are in the same type of circumstance potentially that you are going through. I think it's about building that community. It's about building that support network around you. It's not just about you and starting it off, because that's a very daunting experience, right? And just thinking, well, I'm going through XYZ, and how do I deal with this? It's about building support groups. It's about talking and being transparent about certain elements. Every single life stage is challenging. It doesn't matter what age you're at. There are hardships that we all go through and challenges, and I know that quite well. And it's about surrounding yourself with those individuals and growing that support group. And that doesn't mean you do it through Facebook. You don't do it on platforms that are social media platforms. You do it on secure platforms where you can have trusted experts that help and support you, or you have access to those folks. And I think that's what's really critical first. It's about growing that community. And that's something that we talk about a lot in my company in particular, is about that safety and that security, because we've seen far too many times personal health information. People might think, well, I'm just asking on Facebook a very simple question. It's not a simple question, and it's, your personal health information starts from the moment that you ask that question, and it can be severely compromised. So I think it's about building a community, a trusted community, and having access to those communities. And then in there, really focusing on what it is that you need and the support that you need. As we saw also on the slide there are a few mental health applications, not just Treehouse, there's others that have practitioners and accessible practitioners for many different stages of your care, and I'd encourage you to look at those as well.
I do just want to make also a quick plug that we have counseling services here through the college for all students to access for free. And then as well as directly above us is the health and wellness zone. And there's a trained peer there every day from 11 to 4 to have these chats and connections, because connection is also very important. So yeah, something else to bring up. Yeah. Hang on, Sam, I'm just going to bring you the mic.
I think all of the advances in women's health is fantastic, but I'm just wondering, is there any work that's done in terms of accessibility for those services and advancements? Because not all economic backgrounds have the ability to go for private health care practitioners, or even some of the advancements in women's health products.
Yeah, this is something that is critical, and I think thank you very much for bringing that to light, because it is critically important to talk about that. What we do at Treehouse in particular is, again, we provide technology to a lot of those individuals that help and support folks. Many of our practitioners are individuals who offer services for underserved populations or individuals that are of low income. So, for example, we have a group in Southern Ontario. They're called Perinatal Wellbeing Ontario, and they are a group of 20 plus therapists that help and support individuals, a lot of single parents, a lot of new Canadians, a lot of individuals that come from low income backgrounds and vulnerable populations, I will say. And those individuals have to, and graciously offer care services for free or at a very low price. It's really like a pay what you can model, to be very clear. And so those types of organizations do exist. However, they don't have the ability to market themselves. They don't have the marketing budget. They're often a not-for-profit or a charity. And that's something that we're doing at Treehouse, is trying to shed light on that and be able to say that these do exist. So if you are a single parent in Sudbury and you feel incredibly isolated, and you are likely just even geographically isolated, you have the accessibility to go to Treehouse and find, for example, those practitioners to pay what you can and get access to care. It's something that we're very much focused on from a marketing perspective to showcase that you don't need to have this, budget in order to access care. There are services out there, and there are many types of healthcare practitioners that are very much willing to help and support you. This is an issue that is going to be, and it has remained in our communities, and it's important for us to offer preventative care measures in order for us to help everyone.
That's great. That was actually going to be my next question about people with low funding. So I think it is helpful because it is a barrier, and I know, all of these are compounding things that can make things harder. So yeah, the lack of access to funding is important. I guess ultimately, like, you showed us the Femtech stuff, and you showed us like a bunch of different services that can be offered. But how do people, like, these are all, I guess, how do people connect if they're looking for to start in technology that's not necessarily around like healthcare or like women's health?
So tech in general?
Yeah.
So
Like,
if we don't talk about women's health and you want to start it like in tech?
Just general,
So, in general, we can talk about that, absolutely. As I mentioned on the slide, if you're if you're a student or you're thinking about ways to kind of dip your toe in technology and get involved in a co-op or an internship position or a summer position, summer's around the corner, I think it's important to think about what it is that you like and what you'd like to contribute, right? Is your skill set graphic design? Are you a web developer? Are you someone that likes mobile applications? There's so many different areas there that you can contribute to the advancement of technology, or doing that through a case study in your class, working with your professor, for example, and that's critical, I would say. But if you are interested in technology and starting a business, I guess what I could say there is there shouldn't be any obstacle for you. I think if you have an idea, as that one person said in that promo video that you have, ideas are worthless, and they are. You can have 1,000 ideas, and even what Treehouse was in the beginning is not what it is today. So until you take that idea and actually make it happen, that's when it starts to have its value and its worth and its impact on who it is that you are targeting as your customer or the audience that you focus on. So I think what I can say is that if you are interested in entering that space, is just to start. Build your network, have conversations with people like me, connect with folks who are around you, talk to your professors. They're usually very well connected. Talk to your counselors, talk to individuals at, I guess, student services, and ask those questions and see, maybe they'll prompt you in some way, or maybe they'll provoke you to think in a different space so that you can then have access to those individuals. You have a lot of resources around you. You have the privilege of being able to access those resources, so take advantage of that, because many people don't have that privilege, and I think it's incredibly important to recognize.
Yeah, next question, Rebecca.
Turning it on would help. You mentioned in your presentation, you mentioned stigma, and there's something we're very much focused on here is reducing the stigma of different types of things. What ways are you reducing the stigma of women's health and just talking about it? What are some different things you're doing?
So this is something that I deal with on a daily basis. I deal with an uphill battle every single day. I spend many, many hours and days educating men specifically on the space that is impactful and what it is that we're building. At the same time, talking about also why this is important, and I don't know why it's an issue still. I make it very raw, I'll be quite honest with you. What we're building at Treehouse is not just for a woman, for example. A lot of fertility issues also start from men, and it's important for us to recognize that. There was even a WHO article that came out recently about how sperm count in men has been the lowest in decades. And this is a global trend, right? And that has to do with some geographic and environmental factors that we've been exposed to. So it's important about understanding that this is not a niche market. I don't want to hear that term when I hear, this is very niche what you're building. It is not niche. It is just half the population of the world, but at the same time, it impacts everyone. And having access to great care impacts the way that our economy functions. If an individual is going to be able to support their pregnancy or support themselves or then support their child, a healthy mom and baby will create a healthier economy, because that woman will be able to go back to work and contribute to the economy. And so when I put it into perspectives like that, I always try to bring it back into the benefits that it has to the economy, the benefits that it has to the community. It's not just about creating a technology that's going to help one woman. That's not what it's about. It's about seeing that greater picture. And as far as I'm concerned, it's easier said than done. I will be very frank with you. But sometimes just being very frank about it with certain folks is what you have to do. And just speaking quite directly to them.
It's so wild to me, because if it was just an app about like men's health, you wouldn't have to justify to women why it was important, like prostate cancer or whatever. Like you would just like, there's an app for that, or you know what I mean? Like it's always when it's like marginalized population is being advocated for, and women are half of the population and marginalized being advocated for, that we have to justify why we have to do this, and it's. I have a job here and all those things. So it is wild to me that we're still like having to have those conversations. You said it's a daily conversation of like, why is women's health important? Well, we're half the population. And generally every single person born comes from not necessarily people who identify as female, but like a uterus, right? Like every person born, every single person in this room came from a uterus. So let's just get that clear. The person in the back has a question. Oh, Sam's on the other side of the room.
So my question is just
She's loud. We're good, I think. Oh, okay. We're coming. She's coming.
project.
Good job.
I
Good job,
project
Sam.
anyway, so.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is just when you were developing this idea, did it come from like a personal place where you're like, I need to solve this problem like for me? Or were you thinking more like, I know so many people that are struggling with this or who are having these issues? Just because building a business and building a brand in general is like, it's such a process, right? So it has to always come from somewhere. So I guess I'm just wondering like where it came from for you.
Yeah, it came from both. It came from myself being a parent. I quickly realized as soon as I got pregnant and even when I became a mom that it was really challenging. And the people who helped me the most were not my medical doctors. It was the lactation consultants. It was mental health support. It was individuals that helped me. And these were all the individuals that were not part of that typical clinical care team, but at the same time, a critical part of your care circle. And I think that's what is really important to remember is that everyone has a care circle, and it's not just when you access care, it's about having that all the time, whether that's a nutritionist, whether that's a physiotherapist, that's your care circle. Those are people that are going to be there for you to help and support you. And so I realized very quickly that not everyone had even known what a care circle was. And that was shocking to me. I grew up in a medical background, and so that was always kind of indoctrinated into my life. But many people didn't have that education, and I saw it firsthand. After my first year of med school, I spent a lot of time in Almont in rural care there, and many women would come in, very young mothers, with 1 or 2 or 3 children, and these would be young ladies under the age of 25 with kids, and not even knowing that there was a breastfeeding expert that could help them, or there was somewhere that they can go and speak to someone. And I thought to myself, well, there's got to be a better way to do this. And it's not going to start from a medical doctor advocating for you because they simply don't have the time, or it's not within their scope. Their scope is to provide care, and that stops there after 6 weeks of delivery or what have you. And so I thought, well, let's find a way to do this. And the best way to do it is with technology, with a device that everyone holds in their hand.
No, I think that's important. And I do, like what you're saying is like, without the steps that you have taken, people have to advocate at every appointment, but they have to know. They have to know that they are going to need some advice from a lactation consultant and that they're going to need a pelvic floor physiotherapist or whatever it is that they're going to need postpartum or while pregnant. All of those things are things that if you don't know and you already haven't no awareness of them or no one's told you about it, that you're not going to be asking for. And that's such a huge healthcare disparity that we currently have, is like people do not know that the services exist to support them to begin with. And you have to do some Googling and figure it out yourself or be educated on it from whatever your degree is in order to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if I answered your question in full there, but the reality is that it came from not only my personal issues that I had, but also the care that I saw or the lack thereof for folks.
Awesome. Any other questions that we have? Oh, yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm watching the screen and I want to ask you, why do you think the future is female?
Why do I think?
Why do you think?
Why do I think the future is female? Yeah, great question. I've never heard that one before. Well, I think what's important here is to recognize that there's a lot of children and young ladies that can make a significant impact in our world. And I was always told by my mother, but also my teachers, that you can have any sort of idea and that can be achieved. And we live, again, like I will say this, in a community and in a place where you can have that and you can make an impact. And there are many places in this world where you cannot do that, unfortunately. And that's what's incredibly tragic. And I think what's critical and the privilege that we have in Canada is to be able to use that voice that we have. And that starts from educating young children and educating everyone, not only just the girls or the females that there are, but educating the fact that it's not just about what we've seen over the last several hundreds of years, which was just male domination and the way that patriarchy has worked. And so I think it's critical for us to talk about issues like this, to destigmatize these issues, and say that they are not just a female problem, but they are a global problem or a community problem or a healthcare problem in general. So I don't know if that answers your question in full, but it's about advocating for the rights that we have. And the fact that I have to even say that we still have to advocate for our rights is shocking to me. But at the same time, recognizing that there are many different individuals out there that will help and support you. Some of the best mentors that I have as well are male. And it's not just from females in particular, I will say that. It is about the community in general and recognizing that we need to work together.
That's really good. And I think just like one thing that I can plug is like the work that we do through Project Lighthouse is about talking to all people, about having conversations about like empowerment and respect and shutting down those myths. Like you're saying like we need to all do these things and have these conversations with children, but like also we can have those conversations with our peers and also our parents or caregivers or whoever makes those things, and not just being like, oh, well, they don't know and we'll just like move on. And again, we also have to have, you know, space to do that and feel safe and whatever. But like having those conversations and seeing like, you know, slight changes. And the thing is like sometimes you're going to have these conversations and you're going to be like, my head, I'm just like punching a wall because it's not getting anywhere. But like do it in a nice way and you know, you can make some progress, right? And having these conversations, like I have seen certain people think in a certain way and then like over time you're slowly directing them. And it is a slow transition that we're in, and it sucks and it's horrible and it should be like way faster and way better, but like we're slowly transitioning there. So help with that transition, you know, not just educating young people, but like your peers and your partners.
Absolutely.
And
the people
everyone.
that are sitting in this room and the classes that you're taking, it doesn't mean you need to be studying, you know, healthcare or medicine or what have you. You might think, oh, well, what does my web design do? That has no impact. Absolutely. It has a tremendous amount of impact. The words that you choose, the colors that you use, all of that is incredibly impactful. And speaking to your colleagues, speaking to your professors, speaking to your team that is around you, that is really, really important. Just having those conversations or writing a paper about it and then presenting it, or seeking out other education to present it even in a different capacity, or having it written in a journal or what have you. So there's a lot of opportunities, and I think it's just about recognizing that you can do that.
We're almost out of time. Does anyone have any last final questions? I just want to make sure that everyone gets heard. Yeah.
This might be easier for volume transmission. I've noticed that issues, especially with marginalized populations like we were discussing, are easily, I don't know if this is a word, but apathized. For example, when we see on the news about like the Canadian women's soccer players advocating for their salary to be the same, it's like you hear people just like, oh, that again. And I'm wondering how you balance persistence with avoiding apathy in the audience that you are speaking to.
Great question.
And a hard one, too.
It's a hard one.
Good. Yeah.
So I think it's about finding not only the passion that you have, but not only the passion, but what is it that kind of, you can have the passion in creating a business or creating what it is that you're doing, but waking up and saying, what is the value that I'm giving? And so the value associated to what it is that you're building. And for me, I'm an incredibly persistent individual. I'm an individual that really firmly believes that certain changes need to be made in healthcare. We have a tremendous amount of fractures in our healthcare system. But how do we continue to speak about that? And how do we advocate that? Whether that's me working with people like you at Algonquin, or whether that's working with healthcare practitioners, I think it's about having a very clear voice as to what it is that you're doing. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be arrogant about it. You don't have to be assertive about it. You just have to state the facts. And sometimes folks don't want to hear it, and they don't think that it's accurate, or they don't think it's a clear picture of the landscape. But when you start to demonstrate that, you know, this is impacting X amount of people, or this is impacting X amount of revenue in the economy, that's when people start to realize, okay, well, this is not just about one person or one issue. This is actually a larger issue. And I think starting to speak like that is when you start to see that people will take whatever issue or the passion that you're working on a lot more seriously. Being able to show it to them in real metrics. I hate to say that. We talk about metrics a lot in my business on a day-to-day basis and whatever it is that we're doing. But metrics are important because they become quantifiable, and you can see that growth month over month or quarter over quarter. And you don't have to make it, you know, mathematical and uncomfortable for folks, but just make it so that they can understand it and digest that information, and then they realize what that impact is.
Okay, good. Yeah, okay. Thank you all for your questions. That was really great. And I just want to, this was very good. And I know that I was, helping to host this, but, I didn't really know what we were going to expect or where we were going to go. And I'm like, wow, this is great. So I'm pumped that we had this conversation, and it's, so in my alley. And I, just reading your bio, I was like, okay, yeah, we'll see where it goes. And I'm like, oh, I love you. So.
Thank you. Thank you for this
I'm
opportunity.
like, oh, great. Yeah. So thank you for
appreciate
coming.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time today. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
So you're doing great work. So, yeah, everyone.